And so without further ado, please welcome our first guest, Representative of North Dakota, Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak. Nice to see you. So let's start with an easy one. Why is it so critical that permitting be addressed, especially in the context of AI and China?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the fact that the audience is almost full and it's 8 o'clock in the morning on a cold day speaks to the importance of permitting reform. But really, when I look at the US and some of our challenges, China is a country of engineers and builders, and we've become a country of lawyers. And we have to flip that because we have unprecedented needs for power and other goods and services in our country, and we can't, we're almost paralyzed in our ability to build linear infrastructure in our country, and we need a lot of it to meet this demand, so that's why we're here.
All right. So you're only a freshman, but you've been able to notch a lot of accomplishments this year, and one of them was you created a working group of stakeholders dedicated to powering the future of AI. Can you sort of talk about that group and your work and sort of how it related to permitting?
Sure. So I come to this job as 12 years as a state utility regulator, most recent president of NARUC, the National Association of State Utility Regulators, and 8 years as a liaison for our state to the MISO region. So tons of experience with power. Also during that time realized how much more power we need because my state started seeing requests for more power gen for AI, and that became a big topic among state regulators across the country, and how are we going to meet this demand? So it was natural for my team to say, hey, you've got a unique skill set here, why don't we start this working group to tackle this issue and try to provide some leadership on it, first by asking for information. So we did a request for information for folks, got 100 replies, and then we've taken that information and really kind of consolidated it around sort of three big issues. How do we stabilize our grid and stop the bleeding? Mm-hmm. How do we optimize what we've got? And then how do we grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also got the House to pass your Cross-Border Energy Infrastructure Act, and it passed, but maybe you could sort of talk about the permitting aspect of it. I know that there were some concerns from Democrats that it would effectively exempt cross-border pipelines from environmental review. Is that a fair criticism?
It is not, no. All of the environmental review processes remain intact for that bill. It just streamlines who's in charge of them, right, and it takes the politics out of it. So Keystone XL was obviously the poster child for that bill, but it could also apply to transmission lines, to power lines going across the border if there was, some controversial one or one that, folks wanted to pull back on or try to prevent or block. So this tries to take that out of off the table and provide certainty, which I spent in my time as a state utility regulator. We permitted in my state, and it was right during the Bakken oil boom. So I was involved in permitting $13 billion worth of energy infrastructure. And the one message I heard loud and clear from industry was the need for certainty. And I tried to apply that, as my job as a regulator, just very fairly, like apply the law, keep it certain, don't throw any curveballs. And that's what industry needs, and that's what we need to bake into the law in some of the processes on the federal side.
Okay. You also recently introduced the FAIR Act, which would bar regional grid operators from charging consumers in states without clean energy policies for multi-state transmission lines that they build to satisfy another state's climate or renewable goals. Can you sort of talk about the impetus behind that?
Sure. Again, coming from my experience as a state liaison to MISO for 8 years, MISO is one of the biggest grid operators, runs the grid in the central part of the country from North Dakota to Texas, 15-state region, 32 million customers. They're in a massive build-out of transmission power lines, which we all know are needed. But the driver of those lines is is important, and who pays for them is even more important. And how you do that matters, because it sends signals down the road for how future lines get built. There's a lot of different drivers for the need for power lines, and they get baked into rates, and utilities earn money on them. And so there is a vested interest to try to build, because it does help you increase your rate base and make more earnings. So you need to balance that all out. And this bill is an attempt to say, like, when it comes to cost allocation, which is not permitting reform, I do not view them in the same bucket, but it gets mixed into permitting reform, because cost allocation helps smooth over the building of transmission. It's probably the biggest thing besides NEPA and Clean Water Act issues. So it does get looped in, and I wanted to have sort of a Republican take on cost allocation in the mix and in the discussion, so that we could look at it from that standpoint. How the biggest thing in the energy sector, I think, is sending the right signals, and those drive investment decisions. They also drive costs and affordability, and those are all big issues. And this is an attempt to say, like, what are the cost causers? And if you're causing the need for a line, then you should pay for it, and that's what the FAIR Act does.
Okay. So let's talk about what's going on the Hill. Well, first of all, let me ask you, what do you see as the legislative path for that? Do you think that bill could be part of a package, or
Sure.
Do you know yet?
I see it as part of sort of the House's approach to permitting reform more broadly, as we talked. I'd love to see that pass. You know, the House is taking more of a menu option, not one big bill. So we've got the Permit Act, we've got speed, we've got a bunch of different smaller bills. I see this as part of that. I'd love to get it through E&C, and then passed by the full House, and then over to the Senate, so that the Senate could use it in its negotiations of a broader, you've got some senators coming up later, so I'm sure they'll talk about their strategy but if it's anything from, if the pass is any indication, they'll probably consolidate things into a bigger package.
Right.
And this could be part of the negotiations for that.
Okay. Well, yeah, turning to what's going on the Hill right now as far as permitting, can you talk about your committee, Energy and Commerce, the Energy Subcommittee, is doing a markup of several bills tomorrow. You're a co-sponsor on one of them, which is the New Source Review Bill, which seeks to kind of revamp EPA's gauge for deciding whether an expansion or an upgrade or to a refinery or some other type of industrial operation would warrant pre-construction permitting under the New Source Review program.
So New Source Review is an issue that has really blocked some good decisions. So like if you've got a power plant, it's a natural gas plant or maybe a coal facility, you want to convert it to power, gas. The New Source Review could prevent you from doing that and creating more efficiencies in existing infrastructure. And so like I said, one of the most obvious things we need to do quickly is maximize our existing resources, get the most out of them that we possibly can. New Source Review can prohibit that because it can trigger new environmental impact reviews for upgrading those facilities and higher standards. And that's not what you want to be doing if you're trying to maximize your existing infrastructure. So I think we need to reform that and take away that disincentive.
Okay, and then separately, you've got transportation infrastructure is taking up its own clean water permitting bill, and then next week you're supposed to have the House take up the SPEED Act from Natural Resources. Do you want to say anything about those two bills?
Sure. Well, when you look at permitting reform, I'm sure all of you agree, there's NEPA, there's the Clean Water Act. Those are the two big buckets of environmental review processes that they hinder development of every resource, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, pipelines, power lines, they're all impacted by those. So streamlining those processes, creating more certainty, limiting timelines, addressing the judicial reform or review processes, all of those are baked into those acts and these bills. and take significant strides forward. I've saw it in some big projects in my state. NEPA can be a big challenge for folks, and the processes can drag out for years. I was one of the 2 people in my state that approved the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota. That was in 2016. That's still in court. And a lot of that was NEPA related. Permits were vacated and then brought back, and it's like, you really couldn't write it more crazy than what's happened with that one. So this provides, again, more certainty there, better timelines, more clarity. And I think most importantly, no matter what your favorite type of resource is, this applies to everything. And I think that's why it has bipartisan support. And I think I'm hopeful that we can get that one done, both the SPEED Act in particular and then Permit Act as well.
Yeah, well, that leads to my next question, which is sort of the bottom line is, how difficult do you think it's going to be to, get these House bills that are moving, the Senate's working on its own bills that we'll discuss later, combine them all into a package, and get something to the president's desk in an election year?
Well, it certainly has a lot of challenges, but I'm a freshman and I'm optimistic. So I also didn't think the government was going to shut down, and we ended up having the record shut down. So that gives you an idea of my naivete. I think, though, I sense that there's a significant understanding amongst both Democrats and Republicans that the need right now is pretty serious. We have to get this done. We really need new power resources. We really need to expand our grid. We have the record demand, and even if we were to build as fast as we ever have in the past, it's far too slow for what we're facing. So we have to get this stuff done. And I sense that there's more of a willingness and interest in moving things forward this time. So I hope that I'm right. I hope that the Senate, it all kind of comes down to the Senate and them being able to get their, their various folks aligned. So the goal from the House is give them as many options as possible. I'm pretty confident we'll get things done on the House side. And then hopefully they'll have enough in that menu to be able to pull together a meaningful package.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to ask you one last thing, and it's not directly related to permitting, but you talked about your experience on North Dakota's Public Service Commission, and can you sort of talk about some of the current unease that's among state utility regulators? We just reported that they're asking FERC now to convene a conference next month to hash out its plans to take control of data centers and interconnection to power grids.
Yeah, this is an issue. I mean, the whole balance between state and federal rights as it relates to all of these energy issues is significant. It's, as a state regulators, I understand you kind of hold your power and your authority tight, and you want to maintain that. And so I think it's part of the broader discussion that we all need to have over those rights and the need. When is it appropriate for the federal government to step in from a national security issue or reliability issues, and take action and provide sort of higher authority? And I think it's fair for the states to be asking that of FERC. I also think it's really important that that we have this conversation and come to an agreement on when that is appropriate for the feds. And it also gets to the issue of reliability. Whose responsibility is reliability? The states have a big role to play, but our grid is interoperated. It doesn't recognize state boundaries. Right. And so state actions affect the reliability of the whole thing. So I think that there's, broader oversight there that also needs to be considered. And all of this is part of that discussion, which we need to have quickly.
Well, speaking of quickly, we're out of time, so we'll have to leave it there.